Hey friends, welcome to Midweek. I'm glad you're joining with us tonight. Let me give you a quick recap of where we've been. We've been studying the life of Joseph all the way back in Genesis, the very first book of the Bible. And in his life, we see that Joseph's had some incredible highs and some very deep lows. And we've been walking through some of those lows and some of those highs the last few weeks as Joseph has been sold into slavery by his brothers. He's been falsely accused of a crime that he did not commit. He's been forgotten about, left in a jail cell for over 2 years, and all he is trying to do is the right thing and honor God in all he's doing. But let me ask you this as we get moving on to tonight. How do you handle the people who have wronged you in your life? Because so far in Joseph's life, he's had many people wrong him. A lot of people have wronged him, and yet God has continually shown favor to Joseph, so much so that people could see God through Joseph and how he handles these situations. And so, although he may get a curveball, he may go through a deep valley, people see God through the way he handles that. So how are you doing with all that? How are you doing with your suffering, with your anger, with your bitterness? Because it's going to come into play tonight as we walk through this final chapter of Joseph's life. There's a lot to talk about. There's a lot to the end of the story, and I may not get into all of the details, but I'm going to try to summarize it this way, is that all of a sudden the famine now begins, right? We know that there's 7 good years and there's going to be 7 bad years. And so Joseph's sitting there and he explains to Pharaoh his dreams, his vision. He says, this is what God is going to show you. It's not my power, but it's God and God's alone, that you're going to have 7 good years, you're going to have 7 bad years. And so he gives them a little word of advice, and this is how this should be handled. Take 1/5 of all the stockpile that we get from the 7 good years, and we'll use it for the 7 bad years to kind of keep our lives ahead, keep our economy going, all that good stuff. Pharaoh thought that was a great idea, and all the other people who heard this too thought this was a fantastic idea. So Pharaoh does something incredible. He gives this guy the number 2 spot in all of Egypt. And Pharaoh himself says the only reason he's not number 1 is because I sit on the throne. And so nothing happens without Joseph's approval. That's pretty high power. But the reason God put him there is because God knew that he could trust him with that, based on the way he handled the previous situations. When he was a slave, he did the best that he could, right? Got promoted to the guy of the house. I mean, he ruled the estate. Everything was under his command outside of Potiphar himself. When he got put in prison for the crime that he was falsely accused for, the jailer put him in charge of all of the jail. Everyone was under him. Not one person made any call unless it came through Joseph. So God has already used these moments to test where Joseph's heart was, because God gave you and I free will. And in that free will, we get to choose sometimes how we live life, and we build our character, and integrity is all from how we do these things. And so God knew that he could trust Joseph with this responsibility, because something massive is about to happen that we don't even realize. God is going to continue the promise he gave to Abraham about him being a father of many nations. And they don't even have a clue what this looks like yet. Jacob has probably heard of the promise, being the descendant of Abraham, his father Isaac, and then there's Jacob. So he probably heard of this covenant that God had with Abraham, but he wasn't sure how it was going to play out. And what I love about the end of this story is that Joseph and his father end up being reconciled, right? The brothers, they go off because they're in the famine now, so they need food. They're hungry. And he goes off and he sends Jacob sends his sons to go to Egypt to try to get some food. And so they go off, they leave the younger brother there, who happens to be Joseph's biological brother, both mom and dad. The rest of them are half brothers, but this one stays home, and they go and they don't recognize Joseph because all this time has passed by, right? Have you ever went back to look at your 8th grade picture when you graduated 8th grade, or even high school? For some of you, are you noticeably different then than you are now? That's what's happened. Joseph, I believe, is around 42 years old, and when he was sold into slavery, he was only about 16 or 17. So a lot has changed in his life since they last knew him, and a lot has changed in their life. And so as they're walking up, they see Joseph, but they have no clue who he is. In fact, his name has been changed. All this stuff about his Hebrew culture is now different. And so they don't recognize him, but he recognizes them. And so when he comes, now he's starting to get conflicted with emotion. Have you ever been a spot in your life, ever had a moment in your life where you were conflicted with emotion? I mean, you didn't know whether to be angry, whether to be sad, whether to be bitter, whether to be joyful. You were just overwhelmed with emotion. And most of the time that comes when there's a moment of forgiveness with somebody who's wronged you in your life. And I don't know your story, but I can almost guarantee that there's somebody in your life who has wronged you so deeply. Maybe it's a spouse who has left or had an affair with you. Maybe it's a coach who belittled you and told you were never going to go anywhere in your life. Maybe it's a parent who has abused you. Maybe it's a sibling who has abandoned you. Maybe it's a girlfriend or a boyfriend where you had just a terrible breakup, and all you think about when you think of that name, when you think of that person, is the bitterness, the anger, the overwhelming emotion that runs through your body. I've been there before, and I know you have too. That's what Joseph is feeling. And yet God does some incredible things here. And Joseph's testing them, and he tests them. They go back home, and he puts the money that they were paying for the grain back into their bag. And then they feel like, oh, shoot, we're going to get killed because they think we're stealing from them. And then they go back and they do what Joseph commanded by bringing their father and his brother back with them. And they all come back. And then Joseph is just overwhelmed with emotion. In fact, so much so that he has to go into the other room so he could just have a hard cry. Because in his heart, I'm sure, in his heart, he's still angry. He's still hurt by what they've done. But yet he is so overwhelmingly joyful that they're alive and that they're well. And now they're in need, and he can help them. And God uses this moment to restore. But if you ever notice the person in the story who happens to be Joseph's father, this is also what I love about the closing of this story, is that Jacob is a deceiver. And you'll see through his life with his own brother Esau, just the deception that he had, and not just with his brother, but also with his father. And he just did all sorts of things where he was really sneaky. And yet, even in this moment, God gives him a vision as they're traveling back to Joseph. God gives him a vision and basically tells him this: I am going to continue my promise through your father and your father's father, through Abraham, through Isaac, and you, Jacob. I'm going to continue this promise as you guys are going to be a massive, massive nation. And so although this move may be uncomfortable, it may be different for you, but I am telling you, this is all going to be for the greater good. And so Pharaoh gives permission for them to have some land within Egypt, and this place grows and continues to grow. And Joseph and Pharaoh have this just great relationship. Although the Egyptians hate the Israelites, they hate them, there's this connection there through Joseph. And so, friends, tonight I really want to focus on forgiveness. Because what would have happened? What would have happened if Joseph said, you know what? Forget them. Because of what they've done to me, forget about all of them. You know, I love my father. I miss him dearly. I love my brother. I miss him dearly. But he was a part of that. And my brothers sold me into slavery. And you know what? They get what they deserve. And if they go hungry, they go hungry. Does that sound like the attitude you and I have a lot of the times? Probably more often than not. I know for me it is. For me it is, because I can hold on to bitterness for a minute. I really can. But you know what? When I start giving it over to God and I say, you know what? I don't want to carry this anymore. Because this bitterness is a poison. It just sucks the joy out of everything that God is trying to do in your life, and you start to believe the lies that Satan is throwing in there about how you're not enough and how you should have done this and you should have responded this way. And God is all about reconciliation. And so what God does is this: not only does he reconcile his son to his father, their family together, but he also reconciles the promise to Jacob that he is still God, and that his promise, his word that he gives to us, is permanent. And so as he goes on, Israel is just overwhelmed as well. And it's all because Joseph was willing to forgive, and God used that moment to extend this massive nation that is about to be born. And it's such an incredible story. And so, friends, I want to ask you this: how are you doing with forgiveness? The person in your life who's wronged you the most, I'm not saying you have to go be best friends with them. I'm not saying that you even have to forget what they've wronged you for. I guarantee you Joseph probably didn't forget it. But God used him and his heart to change a nation because he was willing to do what was better. I want to start going down that harder road, to do what is better. Not necessarily for me all the time, but what's better for the people around me. And sometimes that means to let go of the things that have been hurtful to me and forgive the people who have been the biggest obstacles in my life. And Joseph can give us some good tips on that. So friends, I hope you're doing well. And if you ever need to talk and ever need to let some stuff off your chest, we are here to walk and share life with you. Have a great week, and we'll see you next time.